Hey guys, today's layout is all about my daughter and blowing bubbles. This is part of the monthly YouTube sketch hop that I participate with 8 other ladies featuring a sketch. Hi, I'm Katie Taylor at scrappinkaty.com, where I show you how to preserve your family's memories through the art of scrapbooking. This month's sketch comes from Scrapbooking Cards Today, and the theme is happy. So I am, of course, going to adjust the sketch just a tad bit to fit my photos, which nothing's wrong with that. But I'm not really sure what I'm going to use yet. But I wanted to walk you through my photos first and the sketch, and then that way I can do some planning behind the scenes and then come back and get started. So I have these older photos of our daughter playing with bubbles, and then of course our youngest son is in there too. And so I kind of wanted to create a little collage. Now, of course, the sketch just has 2 photos, but I'm thinking that I can use these. Now, I am going to say that I'm not going to use all of them. If you are like me, it's very hard for me to throw away photos. Very hard. But sometimes it's just necessary. So case in point, these 2 photos, they are very similar. Now, there are parts of each one that I like, but do I need both photos on the layout? Probably not. So I'm going to choose between these 2, which one I like. I like how on this one she's looking at him. She is purposely shooting him in the face with the bubbles, and he is turning his head. Plus, you can see more of his face versus just this one where you can't. Although I like her stance a little bit better on this one, I think that this one is going to tell the story more. So I'm going to go with that one. And then I have several of these. Now, of course, I want this one because the theme is happy, and you can just see the happiness just written all over her face. So we're going to use that one. And then there are these 2. Now, I definitely want this one. This one appears that she is trying to either catch the bubbles with her hand or maybe shooting the bubbles into her hand. Not sure, but I really like that. And I love how the bubble is on her hair. So we're definitely going to keep that one. And then I'm wanting to keep one more. Now, I like this one because her arms are extended. I can only assume that her brother is over here and she's shooting him again, because I think that we would see some sort of something right here if he were, to the side of her. But then I also like this one because all the bubbles. But also to say that I'm probably going to cut one of these down to a 3x4. So I think that I'm going to go with this one. Haven't really decided. That is one of the things I haven't totally decided on those. So I'm going to set those apart. But these 3 are definitely a go. And then this one is not. Now, as far as the other elements of the sketch, I'm not sure if I'm going to bring paper in for this element, or I'm thinking mixed media. So a lot of the girls here on this hop, this monthly hop that I belong to, I just love to watch them do the mixed media, the stenciling, the distress oxides, the shimmer paints. I love to watch that. And so part of me wants to kind of jump on that wagon, especially for this hop. And then part of me doesn't, because they need to do their thing that they're really, really good at. And I don't want to muddy the water by even insulting them by like, oh, here, look at mine. But all that to say that I'm not really sure that I could find this many paper patterns that would fit with the photos. So I still think I'm going to go with some sort of stenciling or mixed media on this, but I'm really not sure. So for my somewhat mixed media, I am going to create a stencil, and I am using this old die from Stampin' Up. And I've pulled out the 3 smaller circles and then just a scratch piece of cardstock. Now, there is something such as stencil paper, but I'm only going to use this in one and done, and so cardstock is fine. I'm cutting those toward the middle of the paper, and that's going to allow me to really blend in without going off this paper and getting onto my project. You could also use punches if you had various sizes. These are the smallest ones I have, so I'd rather use that die. Now I'm going to put that up and then I'm going to bring in my base. For my cardstock base, I am just using white daisy, or you could use white willow. And I am going to tape off my surface just so that little circle that's going off the page does not get on my work surface. Now, for the color, I am using Boho Blue. It was an in color that just retired, but we do have it on the website if you want to grab it. It's really a good blue. And you can see here, I'm just using a blending brush and I'm going over those circles. Now, I am just going to move this stencil down the page and then kind of rotate it so it has a natural look to it, so it's not all the same. And then I'm just going to be applying just some pressure. I don't really want it real dark at this point, but I definitely want you to be able to tell that it's on there. Plus, I am going to sprinkle with water here in just a second. I am going to finish this off at the bottom of the layout and then kind of put that aside. Well, not the ink. I'm going to keep the ink out because now I'm bringing in a stamp set called Drizzling Droplets, and I am going to stamp this. Now, I love this look. It ended up not turning out the way I had it in my head, but you know, that happens very often. But I still end up salvaging the stamp, so I think in the end it looks okay. It would be more like maybe rain instead of blowing bubbles, but I made it work. So I'm going to stamp that at the top of the layout and then stamp it at the bottom of the layout, and then go ahead and ink it up one more time and just loosely stamp that in the middle. The majority of the middle is going to be hidden with the photos. So I decided after stamping, you could really see the dots that were over my stenciled pieces. So I'm just placing the stencil back over the dots. I'm lining them up, and then I'm going ahead and adding more ink to the top of them. You can still see the droplets or the stamped image, but not as much by going over it. I really love how Stampin' Up! Inks layer really nicely on top of each other instead of blending. I finished redoing all of those, and then I decided to kind of just add some ink just loosely over all of this little panel part. And I really like just the little bit of shading that it adds. Now, as far as the rest of the water theme or the bubble theme, you can spray Stampin' Up! Inks with water, and it almost has that Distress Oxide look. The water picks up the color, and then so you just have to blot some paper towels over it, and then you can see it just looks wet. Like I said, it would be really good for a raindrop layout, but we'll make this work. Now, for my photos, I have decided to layer them like this. I ended up getting rid of a photo. I couldn't make the 4 photos work and bring in the little triangle pieces of cardstock and paper. But I think that these 3 photos encompass this memory and this day perfectly, so I'm okay with it. So here are the little triangles. So all I did was cut a 4-inch square and then cut them diagonally. And then I am going to decide which ones to do. I end up using some DSP and then the two-toned cardstock for Boho Blue. Now remember that the two-tone cardstock is on sale right now on my website. I'll leave that link down below. But you can just see the depth and dimension. Those 2 bottom cardstock pieces, those are the same color. But because I'm using the true color for one of them and the lighter color for the other, it just adds a whole lot of depth and dimension, and I love that in the two-toned cardstock. As far as adhering down these little triangles, the bottom piece, which is the DSP, gets adhered directly to the layout, and then I am using some thin 3D foam tape, meaning that the dimension is not very thick. It's actually 1 millimeter for that next piece. I'm just going to trim this off. That is the lighter shade of Boho Blue. And then for the darker side or the true color side, I'm just using regular 3D foam tape. And that way you've got some dimension, but in various depths, I guess you would say. So I've got that adhered down and I'm just going to trim that off, and then those triangles are done. So I have pulled out some ephemera to just kind of add some extra pieces. If you remember, the sketch had these little clusters of embellishments. These are the new ephemera packs. They're actually adhesive backed, and they are the Good Times mix and match. And I just store those in the envelopes that die cuts come in. Since I use magnetic sheets for the dies that match my stamp set for a bundle, I have a lot of those envelopes left. And so they are the perfect size for these ephemera packs. So I've pulled out a tag, I've pulled out a little long, darker blue, and then I pulled out some clouds, as well as some yellow pieces. There is yellow in her gun, and so I just think that these yellow pieces just have a pop to them. Now, for these little white pieces, that remember that I actually cut out to make that stencil, I'm actually going to use these. And so what I'm attempting to do here, I thought I would be able to just put those in the hole and then add some ink over them, but that ends up not working. So I remove those and then I just put just a little bit of adhesive on the back of them and then just add them to that blank spot down at the bottom. And then I can add some ink with that blending brush pretty freely. Those are not going to move. And then I am going to sprinkle those with water, just like I did the ones that are on the base of my layout, to get that water look, and then go ahead and dab off that excess water. And then I can remove those and adhere those to my layout base. I did go ahead and just add some white shadows using a white gel pen. It adds just a little bit of something. It's not really, it doesn't really stand out, but y'all know me. I love gel pen. So I am going to adhere these down again in a little grouping, much like I did on the stencil, just a little bit tighter. And then I'm loving how that just not only brings that stencil over to that right side, but it also just kind of incorporates the bubbles and it makes it look like kind of freelance bubbles. Now I am just using this ephemera. Like I said, it is adhesive backed. So I am trimming some pieces and then of course taking the adhesive off. And then I am able to just adhere that directly to my layout. So I've got the tag and stuff up there, and now I am working with the clouds. This smaller cloud, I am going to take the sticky off, and then I'm going to bring in a stamp set. This is the Storybook Life. I am not sure if this is still available or not, but anytime Stampin' Up! Releases a scrapbooking stamp set, I urge you to go get it. They are perfect for scrapbook layouts, cards. They have oversized sentiments, but I use them all the time. So there was an image that said big smiles. So I have stamped that down on the larger cloud. And then there's one that says fun. And I'm going to ink that up and stamp that down on the smaller cloud. Now I am using Secret Sea. Like I've said in a couple of videos, I absolutely love this color. It is my new go-to color. It's not as stark as black, but it definitely has its presence. And then, of course, with a blue layout, it fits in really nicely. So I am going to also ink up the happy from the Layered Thoughts. And then I am going to use the days from Storybook Life. So a little piecing in two of these sentiments. Now I am going to mask off the birthday. So ink that up, stamp that down. I do forget that those triangles at the bottom left have some 3D foam, and so I don't really get a crisp image. So I've got to layer that back on top and then move my layout down off my surface, and then I like to just get my fingers underneath my project. I know y'all can't see that, but that's my remedy. And then, of course, here is the days. So I am just wrapping that sunny around the side of my block so it doesn't get inked up. And then stamp that down. And then one more image from the Storybook Life is one that says special moments. Now for this one, I am going to ink it up in Boho Blue and I'm going to stamp it under Happy Days. And I'm really, really liking the look of that. Now, remember I have these yellow hearts. Again, they are adhesive backed. So I'm just going to use my paper piercer to remove that adhesive. And there's going to be a couple around the clouds. And then I'm going to put a small one down by the title, which is Happy Days. And then that is actually going to create that visual triangle with those yellows. So I've got the kind of pennant up at the top, and then I've got the 2 hearts on the left by the clouds, and then the single heart down by the title. And I'm really, really liking those pops. Now, as far as embellishments go, I pulled out 3 different ones. I like the texture of one, I like the colors of another, but I end up going with these iridescent flat pearls, I think is what they're called. They'll be linked down below if they are still available. What are these called? Flat adhesive backed pearls. Yes. I went with these, not only are they flat, but I went with them because they're irregular. Because if you notice, the all around dies, those are irregular circles as well. And then, of course, the water little droplets, those are irregular. So just to kind of keep with that, I did kind of go overboard with them like I usually do. It's one of those things that I never know when to stop stamping on my layouts, and I never know when to stop embellishing. But each one of those inked up circles has some, and then of course I have some around the little clusters. Now here I have the Secret C Stampin' Right marker, and I'm just adding my little doodle triangles all around the little clusters as well as around those little flat pearls, just to kind of add some extra little doodle lines. It's just, it's what I do. And I end up doodling around the edge of the layout as well here in just a second. Now, if you follow me, if you subscribe to this channel, if you aren't a subscriber, hit the subscribe button. But if you are not new here, you know that one of my things is I can't have a tag with a hole and not something on the tag. So that tag up at the top has a tiny little hole. So I have used this thread, and I'm just tied a knot, and I'm going to attach that with a glue dot. Now here's where I'm trying to decide what I'm going to use to doodle around the edge. I had a journaling pen that was a little bit finer, which is what I prefer, but I end up going with the Stampin' Right. I am doing it so lightly that you can see that my hand is actually lifting in places, and it's creating kind of that irregular look, and I end up really liking that. Now it's time to bring the sketch back out and kind of compare what it did and what I did. So we have the up and down. I decided to just use a little bit of triangles, and then of course the clusters that are in the sketch. And then of course the kind of collage of photos instead of just the 2 photos. And I end up really, really liking it. Here is a look at that layout, a close-up of not only the water spots, but just all of the tiny little details. In the description below, you'll find all of the products that I used, as well as a playlist to the monthly YouTube hop where you can check out all the other ladies and what they did using this sketch from Scrapbooking Cards today. And then if you aren't in a position to order from any of the product links, remember that you can like, share, and comment to help my channel out. Thanks so much for stopping by and watching. I hope y'all have a wonderful rest of your weekend.